Good morning, dear devotees from Sridhar Mayapur. My name is Madhavananda Das, last time I checked. And this is our daily adventures in Srimad Bhagavatam. Narayanam namaskrityam naram shaiva narhotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayat vedi ramayane shaiva purane bhadate tata Adavante chamadye cha hari sarvatra giyate mukam karoti vachalam pangam lang gayate girim yad kripa tamaham vande shigorum dinataranam paramananda madhavam paramananda he madhavam Padunga Luchi Makaranda Se Makaranda Panakori Anande Bolo Hari Hari Harinka Name Vandavela Parikori Bechakadolam Shri Chaka Dolanka Padaye Manamo Rahu Niranchare Manamo Niranchare Rahu Ha Krishna Boli Jiva Jao Ha Krishna Boli Jao Jiva Moteu Dada Radha Dava Moteu Dada Radha Dava Moteu Dada Radha Dava Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good morning, dear devotees. So we're reading from Canto 3 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Chapter 29, and this is our third session on text number 13, and it looks like we'll probably have a fourth session also. Salokya sasti samipya sarupya katvam apyuta dhiyamanam vrinanti vinamat sevanam janaha. A pure devotee does not accept any kind of liberation, salokya sasti samipya sarupya or ekatva, even though they're offered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Reading from Srila Prabhupada's purport. When a devotee is promoted to the spiritual world Vaikuntha, he receives four kinds of facilities. One of these is Salokya, living on the same planet as the Supreme Personality. The Supreme Person, in his different plenary expansions, lives on innumerable Vaikuntha planets, and the chief planet is Krishna Lok. Just as within the material universe, the chief planet is the sun, in the spiritual world, the chief planet is Krishna Lok. In Krishna Lok, the bodily effulgence of Lord Krishna is distributed not only to the spiritual world, but to the material world as well. It is covered by matter. However, in the material world, in the spiritual world, there are innumerable Vaikuntha planets, and on each one, the Lord is a predominating deity. A devotee can be promoted to one such Vaikuntha planet to live with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Gora Draganya Gana Gocha Goloruharam Goranga Gudatama Gopyada Kopa Vriksham Gopala Gada Ratijam Yati Singha Gora Govinda Deshika Varam Satatam Namam Panchakalpatadivishcham Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Actually, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is the greatest adventure, because the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna Tulya Bhagavat Vibhu Sarvashroy, that it's an incarnation of Krishna. But this amazing thing about this incarnation of Krishna, known as Srimad Bhagavatam, is that he speaks to you. Krishna will also speak to you, but sometimes it's hard to hear his voice. And so it's such a wonderful thing to come together with like-minded devotees every day and hear and discuss Srimad Bhagavatam. So we have some thoughts we'd like to share with you today, and I'm hoping at the end that devotees may have some reflections, further thoughts that something you heard in the class that you liked or reminded you of something else to help us to further fluff out these topics. So this verse, Lord Kapiladeva is explaining to his mother, as Vishwanath says, it's a further explanation of the phrase Yata Gangam Busam Buddho, from the 11th verse, the previous verses that we were speaking on. And those verses describe how the mind of a devotee can't be stopped from going to Krishna, just as you can't stand in front of the Ganga and say, okay, we decided you're not going to flow to the ocean today. The Ganga won't listen to you. And to give an example of that, Vishwanath says he uses a kind of logic called kaimutya nyaya, or the logic of what to speak of. So what to speak of not wanting material desires, the devotees he discusses in this verse, in the 13th verse, salokya sasti samipya sarupya katvam apyuta diyamanam nagrinati vinamat sevanam jana. It says diyamanam, even if they're offered grinati vina, they don't want it unless there's some service there also. And so we spoke in our first session about this verse, something about how the devotees are so very, very attached to service. And then in our second session on this, we spoke something about two varieties of these four kinds of liberation. We say four because the devotees, they reject ekatva, or oneness with the Lord. So there's two varieties of the four types of liberation, sukha-aishvaryotara, or the sukha-aishvaryotara. Uttara means the predominant desire, that they're desiring some happiness and some opulence, and that's why they want liberation. Better than them, he says, is the devotees who are prema-premātura, where they want liberation so they can serve the Lord. They don't really care about liberation for themselves, but the reason why they're asking for it sometimes is because then, if they're near to the Lord, then they can render that service. So in our last session, we spoke about how of all those devotees who are known as parama-premātura, again the word uttara is there, the devotees who have the topmost prem, parama-premātura bhaktas, they're one-pointed in their devotion. And we spoke a little from Raghunath Das Goswami's Manasiksha, where in text 4 he says, Apityatva Lakshmi Pati Ratyamito Vyomanayana. Even he said, don't think about Lakshmi Devi. Don't think about Lord Narayan. Rather, you should just worship Krishna in Radharani. Braje Radha Krishna Sarati Manido Tvam Bhajamana. Fix your mind upon them. So, parama-premātura bhaktas are those devotees who have fixed their minds on a particular form of the Lord. These are prematura bhaktas But Rupa Goswami, he says there's a parama-premātura bhaktas. Those devotees who are the topmost devotees. And these are the devotees whose hearts have been stolen by the wonderful son of the king of Braj, Krishna. And even if Lord Narayan personally comes and says, here I am, I have a benediction for you, they say, no, we're not interested in that. We only want Krishna. So this is the nature of Gaura Bhakti. This is the nature of the followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu, it's taught the devotees to be akantic, to be one-pointed. In a previous session, we gave a very stark or a strong example of that, wherein Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was speaking with Advaita Acharya, and Mahaprabhu told Advaita that I'm rejecting this Mukunda. And Advaita Acharya asked, why? And Mahaprabhu said, because he's worshipping the four-armed form of the Lord. And then Advaita Acharya, who is four-armed Mahavishnu, right? He says, is there something wrong with that? And Mahaprabhu said, yes, the two-handed form of the Lord is supreme. And then we went on to tell the story about the deity of Alarnath in Brahmagiri. It's Devsis. Someone, if you want, you could write him back and just tell him to leave it there at the place. Sorry, maybe this is real life. So, you just call him and say, tell him it's a bad time, I say. So we heard about why it was that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became even more ecstatic in front of that four-armed deity of Lord Narayan when he says it's an offense. And that's a long discussion. You have to look in a previous katha for that. So the nature of the Gaura Bhaktas, they're very, very one-pointed. And Prabodhananda Saraswati describes this in a very wonderful way in his Chaitanya Chandamrita. He says, Gauras Chora Shakala Maharat Kopi Me Tibra Virya. That my faith in Vedic and ordinary duties, my embarrassment to sing, dance, and laugh, my natural tendency to be absorbed in material activities, they've all been stolen away by a very powerful, golden complexion thief. Whatever faith I have in Vedic and ordinary duties, whatever embarrassment I may have to sing and dance and laugh in public, and he says, whatever natural tendency I have for materialistic activities, for sense gratification, all of those things have been stolen by Gauras Chora, by a golden complexion thief. So this is the nature of the parama-premātura bhaktas. And we hear in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that on one occasion, at the place which is now known today as Saptasan Road, that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had a conversation with the devotee Brahmananda Bharati. And it was a long discussion, we won't go to, but Brahmananda Bharati, he had some attraction for Brahman, and therefore he's Brahmananda. But he had this discussion with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and after speaking with Mahaprabhu, then he spoke a verse which is quoted in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It's a verse which is written by the great devotee Bilvamangala Thakur. Advaita Vitipatika Rupasyaha Swananda Singhasana Labda Dikshaha Satena Kenapi Vayam Hatena Dasi Krita Gopi Vadu Vitena. He said, although I was worshipped by those who are on the path of impersonalism, and although I was initiated into self-realization through the yoga system, Advaita Viti, I was on this path of monism, and I became upasya, worshipable for everyone on that path. He said, nonetheless, Satena, some cheater. Kenapi vayam hatena. Hatena means by force. By force, this cheater, dasi krita gopa vadu vitena. This, I've been turned into a maid servant, even though I'm worshipped by the persons on the path of impersonalism, and I was initiated in a very respectful way into the yoga system. Some cunning boy who's always joking with the gopis has made me into a maidservant. So, in this way, Bilvamangala Brahmananda Bharati, he began to point out in an indirect way about the glories of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we were reading something from the first section, the second chapter of Srila Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, wherein he gives a very wonderful explanation, elaboration of this verse quoted, spoken by Lord Kapiladeva, Salokya Sasri Samapya. And in the course of that discussion, we're continuing, he says, Tatrapya kantinam shrestha. Amongst all the ekantic, or one-pointed devotees, the shrestha, or the best of them, are those devotees who are Govinda Hrita Manasa, whose hearts and minds have been stolen by Govinda. They're the best. Ye sam shrisa prasado pi mano hartum nasakniyat. Even the prasad, or the mercy of Lord Narayan and other forms of Krishna cannot attract them. And therefore, Rupa Goswami gives a verse which is also quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Interesting verse, it's not found in Srila Prabhupada's Nectar Devotion, although it's included in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's a very important verse. Mahaprabhu quotes this verse when he's speaking to the father of Gopal Bhatta Goswami, what was his name? Venkata Bhatta. And he's speaking with Venkata Bhatta about the topmost form of the Lord. And he said, look, Siddhanta tvastu vedepi Sri Sa Krishna Sarupayo Rasano Krishyate Krishna Rupam Esa Rasastiti. Although Siddhanta twas, in terms of Siddhanta, in terms of philosophy, there's abedi, there's no difference between Sri Isha, Sri means Lakshmi, Isha means the Lord Narayan, who's the Lord of Lakshmi Devi, and Krishna. Although there's no difference between the two, still, Surupaya, Krishna's form, Rasano Krishyate Krishna Rupam Esa Rasastiti. Krishna's form is superior because it's situated in the topmost rasa. And maybe we'll speak something more about this in our next session, and from Jiva Goswami's commentary on this verse, about how the queens of Krishna, the 8 principal queens, who are all very satisfied with their relationship with Krishna. Krishna, after all, is Purnam, he's complete. But still, those queens, when they saw the form of Vrindavan-bihari Krishna at Kurukshetra, whose form came out when he was associating with the Brijbasis, they became very, very attracted by that. So this is the nature of the parama-premātura Bhaktas. Perhaps we'll even discuss about this in this time right now. I'll even go ahead with this. Those Dwarka queens, in the 83rd chapter, the 10th canto, they have a conversation with Draupadi, the wife of the Pandavas. And Draupadi's asking, what's it like being married to Krishna? And different questions like that. And so those queens, they tell Draupadi, these are the 8 main queens, they said, Navayam sadbi samrajam surajam bojam apyuta vairajam parameshchayam cha anantyam va hare padam kamayamaha etasya srimat pada raja shriya. The word shriya is significant. Kucha kumkuma gandatya murdna votum gada brita. They told him, this is their symptom, these queens of Dwarka, these are also parama, prematura Bhaktas, and they're one-pointed. They only want Krishna, and they're expressing now their feelings to Draupadi. They're addressing her as Sadhvi, that you're a very chaste lady. And they said that, we don't want samrajyam. We don't care if we become the queens of the whole world, of the whole universe. Swarajyam, we don't care if we become like Sati, the wife of Lord Indra, the king of heaven. Bhojam, we don't care if we get unlimited ability to enjoy. Apitu, even we don't care by Rajam, for mystic power, Parameshtyam, the position of Lord Brahma, and even Anantyam, that we may become immortal. In other words, that we can have liberation and go to the spiritual world. We don't care about all those things. They said, Kamaya Mahe, we have one desire. And what is that one desire that we have? Itasya Srimat Pada Raja Shriya Kucha Kumkum Gandatyam. All that we want to put on our heads the dust of Krishna's feet, which is coming, that dust has the Shriya Kucha Kumkuma Ganda. Ganda means a fragrance, or the fragrance of the kumkum that comes from the breast of Shriya. Now, Shri is a word for the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi Devi. So the queens, they're speaking like this. But Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he comments on this verse. He says that the Shri here is not Lakshmi Devi, the wife of Lord Narayan, because after all, our acharyas explained that Lakshmi Devi, she couldn't get the personal association of Krishna, even after she did so many austerities. And we spoke about that in a previous session, how Lakshmi Devi, I think in our last session, how Lakshmi Devi, she's still there today in the place known as Bilvavan, doing intense austerities, hoping that she can enter into Vrindavan. And every year they have a special Lakshmi Puja, and the Brijbasis go there, but it's a very different type of Lakshmi Puja. They don't go there to ask for benedictions for Lakshmi. They go there to give her benedictions. Yo, Lakshmi, we feel really sorry for you. We give you our blessing that you can someday enter into Vrindavan. So the queens at Kurukshetra, they went on to tell Draupadi, Brajastriyo yad vanchanti pulinjastrina viruddha gavas charito gopaha padasparsham mahatmana. We want that same contact with Krishna's feet that the gopis of Vrindavan have. And that even the Pulinda women, these tribal ladies of Braj, what they desire, the touch of the dust that he leaves on the plants and the grass as he tends his cows in Vrindavan. So now these Dwarka cranes, they've been upgraded. Their desire, their focus on Krishna, now they've seen. We sometimes speak about this, how Krishna opened a school of Braj Prem, the university. And the first student was Uddhava, and he was the only student. And Krishna sent him to Braj to give a message to the gopis, but also to train up Uddhava so that he can see something higher. Because Uddhava had a little abhiman, a little pride, thinking, yes, I'm Brihaspati Sishya, I'm the disciple of Brihaspati, and I have so much gyan, I know so many things. So perhaps in that sense, I don't know of any comments exactly upon it, but perhaps Uddhava therefore is a Sukhaishvarya Uttara Bhakta. He had some, at least at that point, some desire for Aishvarya, for knowledge and things. He had some appreciation for that. But by the association of the Braj Gopis, in hearing the Brahmara Gita from Srimati Radharani, at the place today known as Uddhava-Kyari, which is there at Nandagaon. If you go on Braj Mandal Parikrama, it's a very wonderful, quiet place we like to go to very much. There he heard Srimati Radharani's mad talks with a bumblebee the Brahmara Gita. And Uddhava was raised to a higher grade. So that was the first University of Braj Prem. And the second University of Braj Prem was opened by Krishna in Kurukshetra. And the students there were the members of the Yadu dynasty, headed by the queens and Krishna's mother and father in Mathura, Devaki and Vasudeva. And they got to see Mother Yashoda. They got to see the gopis of Vrindavan, and they became humbled. They were raised to a higher platform. And therefore, Jiva Goswami, in his commentary, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he quotes these verses, these words of the Dwarka queen spoken to Draupadi to indicate how those queens had come to the point of parama-premātura. They come to the topmost platform of love. So the nature of that parama-premātura bhakti, or that topmost level of love, is that they have attraction for the form of Krishna, and they're not attracted by any other forms of the Lord. Yesham Sri Prasadopi, even though Lakshmi Devi, Lord Narayan, may offer some prasad, some mercy to them, no hartam nashoknya. Their minds are not attracted by, they can't be stolen, but they are stolen by Krishna, by Govinda. And therefore they're ekantinam shrestha. They're the topmost of devotees who are serving in a one-pointed way. And therefore it's a very important part of our philosophy. Srila Prabhupada never established deities of Lakshmi Narayan. Now someone at this point may point out the fact, several interesting facts. One, that Srila Prabhupada established deities in Mumbai, Sita, Ram, Lakshman, Hanuman. And as far as I know, he didn't establish the deities of Sita, Ram, Lakshman, Hanuman in Delhi, but I believe, I would have to check, but I suspect that Srila Prabhupada instructed that those deities be installed. And Srila Prabhupada also installed deities like that in the Manor in England. So someone may say, why is he doing that? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati never established deities of Sita, Ram, Lakshman, Hanuman. Nor do we know of any other acharyas in the line of our Gaudiya line who established deities of Sita, Ram, Lakshman, Hanuman. Why did they do that? To attract persons who had some attraction for those particular forms, and to show them that Krishna is the topmost form. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in his temples, he established the deities of Radha Krishna, and he would establish the deity of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by himself, without Nityananda, standing next to Radha and Krishna. And he said that if Mahaprabhu is not installed there, then it's not complete. So Srila Prabhupada did like it. Srila Prabhupada also, sometimes devotees, they complain. They say, oh, you ISKCON devotees, you don't know Rasa, you don't know Siddhanta. Right here it says, Siddhanta tvasta vedepi Sri Sri Krishna Sarupayo, Rasa no Krishna te, Krishna Rupa me Sarasastiti, that there's a difference between Krishna and Narayan. I mean, the form of Krishna is superior. So then why do you people give these ridiculous names, calling Krishna in Delhi Parthasarati, Shri Shri Radha Parthasarati? Why do you say Shri Shri Radha Londonishvara? Why do you say Radha Parasishvara? Why do you say in Los Angeles Shri Shri Rukmini Dwarkadish? And sometimes devotees have the idea that it was some ISKCON devotees who did this. They should look at the history. It was Srila Prabhupada who gave those names. In Los Angeles, Srila Prabhupada addressed the deities which we now call Shri Shri Rukmini Dwarkanath, or the small deities which Prabhupada personally installed. He addressed them as Radha Govinda. But later he approved the names Rukmini Dwarkadish because this place was like Dwarka. And in Delhi, there was a conversation with Gopal Krishna Maharaj and some devotees. Was it Gopal Krishna Maharaj, or maybe it was another devotee? Anyway, he was saying that Prabhupada, the Gaudiya Math devotees, are complaining how you're establishing deities of Radha Krishna and calling them Radha Radha Parthasarathi, how Parthasarathi is Krishna on the battle of Kurukshetra, and you got Radharani hanging out with Arjuna while Arjuna's shooting arrows and having this big war in the Kurukshetra. Srila Prabhupada's reply was very beautiful. Prabhupada said, oh, is there a time or a place when Krishna is separate from Radharani? Radharani is always there. Now, someone at this point may correctly point out that still our Gaudiya Vaishnavas don't use names like that. So we should understand Srila Prabhupada's motivation. Srila Prabhupada was a consummate preacher. He wanted, for the pleasure of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for the pleasure of his beloved spiritual master, he wanted to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. And so in some of these temples where many Hindus were coming, Srila Prabhupada wanted to establish that Radha Krishna are everywhere. And to show them that if you're attracted to the form of Lord Ramachandra, Krishna is also connected with Lord Ramachandra, but he actually is superior. And therefore Prabhupada put Radha Krishna in the center of the altar. And he put Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman off to the side. In New Dwarka, I don't have time to discuss this today. It's a very, very big discussion. But I marked it. One sannyasi friend of mine who's with in the Gaudiya Math wrote to me some years ago, complaining, how is it that the devotees are calling the deities there Rukmini Dwarkadish? Krishna has a flute. Krishna has a peacock feather in Los Angeles temple. That's not Dwarkadish. Dwarkadish in Dwarka, Krishna in Dwarka doesn't have a flute. He doesn't have a peacock feather. How is it the devotees are saying like that? And I wrote him back quite an elaborate letter with many, many different pramanas, which I don't have time to get into today. But I pointed out how our acharyas are described in different namastakams and different prayers to Srimati Radharani, how she has different names. Their names are Radha, and one of those names is Rukmini. And this is given by several of our acharyas. And I also pointed out the fact that our spiritual master, on one of the lectures that he gave there in New Dwarka, he told a very interesting story, which I'm hesitant to even touch on because it's a very elaborate discussion, very elaborate discussion. He told the story of Nava Vrindavan from Rupa Goswami's Lalita Madhav in a kind of condensed form. And I pointed out to this sannyasi friend of mine, why did Guru Maharaj speak about that? Because to give you the skinny of Lalita Madhav, which would take us probably a week to properly explain, but to give you the skinny of it, Krishna in Lalita Madhav, he's in Dwarka and he's missing Vrindavan. And there's another Vrindavan garden, a new Vrindavan garden, which was constructed by Vishwakarma. And Radharani meets with Krishna there. And the final conclusion Rupa Goswami gives, very difficult thing to understand, it would take us a long time to explain properly, is that actually Krishna never left Vrindavan. But all of this was a dream. And that's the Never Vrindavan garden. And this was Guru Maharaj's explanation. In other words, indicating that Rukmini Dwarkadish are actually Radha Krishna in this Never Vrindavan conception, which is given by Rupa Goswami and Lalita Madhav, also discussed extensively by Sanatana Goswami and Brihad Bhagavatamrita, to also mention a little by Raghunath Das Goswami in his Manasik, in his Mukta Charit, and by Rupa Goswami, who gives a few verses mentioning it in his Ujjvalini Mani. I won't go any further with that. But we should understand that Srila Prabhupada is in the line of these parama-premātura Bhaktas who are very, very one-pointed. And there's an interesting conversation, which I don't have in front of me right now, but it was in like 1968 between Srila Prabhupada and Shyamasundar Prabhu's Malati, Shyamasundar Prabhu's wife Malati. And she was asking Srila Prabhupada, why do devotees worship different forms of the Lord? And like Lord Narayan, and Prabhupada's telling her, if you want to worship some other form, that's fine, you can do that, but we worship Krishna. Why? Prabhupada says, why worship any other form of the Lord? The form of Krishna is the topmost form of the Lord. So I want to conclude our discussion today with a wonderful story from Jagannath Puri, which is not very well known by devotees. In fact, to my knowledge, this is when we printed it in one of our Krishna Kirtamrita magazines, it was the first time the story had ever been printed in English, and as far as I know, even in a real language. There's a story behind it. In our previous magazine, I'd written an article composed of some research that I'd done on different dresses of Lord Jagannath. And I was able to find out the dates in which they give those dresses and what the dresses are made of and the story behind them. But there was one dress that I was able to find out the different components of it and the date that they offered that dress, but I wasn't able to find out a story behind it. And so a little after that time, we were invited by some devotees to meet with Gajapati Maharaj Dibya Singh Dev, the king of Puri. And we presented him with our magazine, and he was very pleased with it. And I thought to myself, oh, this is a very good opportunity. Now let me take the chance and ask him a question about this dress, because Gajapati Maharaj is one of the world's foremost authorities on Lord Jagannath. So I asked him, Maharaj, I said, we found out about so many dresses of Lord Jagannath, but the Sunavesh, Suna in Oriya language is the same thing as a Suno in Bengali. It means gold. The gold dress that Lord Jagannath wears on the day of Bahuda Ekadasi when he returns to the Jagannath Mandir after the Rath Yatra. And on that day, it's said between the three deities, Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, they have over 1 ton of gold in the form of ornaments and crowns. They have solid gold hands and solid gold feet and gold earrings and nose rings and necklaces and just so much gold. It's a very, very opulent dress. So I asked him, what is the history behind that? What is the story behind it? And Gajapati Maharaj really touched my heart. And at that time, he stopped for a moment, he thought. And then with utter simplicity, which is a symptom of a Vaishnava, he turned to me and he said, I don't know. And then he told me, you should go to Pramod Kumar. He's known as the Samanta Pandit, or the Raj Guru. And he's the guru, their family are the Kula Gurus for the Gajapati kings, the kings of Puri. And you tell him that I sent you. I think he gave me a little note. And you go to see him and ask him, maybe he can tell you the story. So we went to see him. And again, as far as I know, this was never written in a book, even in a real language, but rather it was a handed down tradition story from this Raj Guru. And he told us a wonderful story which illustrates the nature of this parama-premātura Bhaktas in connection with Lord Jagannath. During the reign of Raj Chodaganga, this is about 900 years ago today, in Jagannath Puri, Raj Chodaganga is the king who is credited for having built the Jagannath Mandir in Puri. And not only did he build the temple, but he was also apparently such a great devotee of Lord Jagannath, so devoted to Lord Jagannath, that on a regular basis, he was going to dress the deities personally. And he's a king. Kings are really into swords and gold and fighting and all this kind of wealth and beautiful girls and opulent stuff like that. So when he would dress Lord Jagannath, he would dress him in a completely opulent, astonishing way. And then he would leave the temple to go to do his business as a king in the palace. After he would leave, every time he dressed, there was another Brahmin there in the temple. The Brahmin there, his name was Dineshwar Sharma. And Dineshwar Sharma was very much distressed and disturbed when he would see how Maharaj Chodaganga would dress Lord Jagannath. And he thought, this is not good. Lord Jagannath is Vrindavan-bihari Krishna, Krishna in Vrindavan. And he likes the love of the Brijbasis. He likes the mood of the gopis at Vrindavan. And we shouldn't dress him like this. He likes to have a flute. He likes to have a peacock feather and to be dressed with flowers and tulsi. And so every time Maharaj Chodagangadev would dress Jagannath, Dineshwar Sharma would take off all the ornaments that the king had put on and redress Jagannath in a simple kind of fashion. And the king never knew what was going on until one day. Something happened, perhaps we don't know, but perhaps the king left his sword or something on the altar, I don't know. And he finished dressing Jagannath, he went away, and then he realized, oh, I forgot something, and so he went back to the temple. By the time he'd gone back, Dineshwar Sharma had done his work, and Lord Jagannath was now dressed like a cowherd boy at Vrindavan. And when Maharaj Chodagangadev saw that, Chanakya Pandit says, don't wake up a sleeping snake, a dog, or a king. Kings can be very dangerous. Maharaj Chodagangadev became furious, and he started shouting, who did this? Who dared to dress Jagannath like a village boy? He's the Lord of the universe. Lakshmi Sahasrasata Sambrama Sevyamanam. He's the Lord of all the Lakshmis. Who dared to dress Jagannath like a village boy? And all the Pandits were shaking, and they were shaking their head. It wasn't me. I didn't do it. And finally, Dineshwar Sharma, he stepped forward and he said, I did it. Because Krishna, he likes his pastimes in Vrindavan. The topmost form of the Lord is Vrindavan-bihari Krishna. And he likes to be dressed like a cowherd boy. He likes to associate with the gopis of Vrindavan, dressed in that way. Anyway, there was a big argument. Like sometimes we have big arguments in ISKCON. We don't have a monopoly on that. It also takes place in Gaudiya Vaishnavism and other places. So Maharaj Chodagangadev got really angry and was shouting at Dineshwar Sharma. Dineshwar Sharma was shouting back, and they wouldn't give in. Finally, they agreed, okay, we need to have a mediator for our disagreement. There was no ISKCON resolve at that time. So they went to one rishi whose name was Mudugal Rishi. And they came before him and they said, look, we have this disagreement. Would you please be a moderator? And so then each one of them presented their side of the argument. And Maharaj Chodagangadev said that Jagannath, there's not enough opulence in all the three worlds to dress him. We give him a few tons of gold. It's nothing. He should have the whole universe. And then Dineshwar Sharma was saying, no. Jagannath is Vrindavan Krishna, and he likes his sweet pastimes in Vrindavan. And so Mudugal Rishi was listening to both of them. And finally said, well, it's not easy for me to say which one of you is correct. He said, I'll tell you what. Both of you stay here for a few days. Let me think about it, and I'll give you some verdict. And he made arrangement for them to have separate guest rooms so they didn't get in a big fight. And he arranged for them to have Jagannath Mahaprasad every day. Mudugal Rishi is a very first-class host. And so on the first day, when they brought the Jagannath Mahaprasad before Dineshwar Sharma, now, although he likes Krishna in Vrindavan, he's also a Puri Panda. And when they honor Jagannath Mahaprasad, they do Vishesha Acharana, they do long Acharana, and then they close their eyes, they do some prayers. Om Swasino Govindaha, Swasino Pyutantanto, Swasino Vasudeva Vishnadadatu, Swasino Narayan Vai, Swasinaha Padmanabaha Purushottamo Dadatu, Swasti Swasti Sumangalai Kesho Mahan Shri Krishnaha, Satchidanandaganaha, Sarveshwareshwaro Dadatu. And he opened his eyes. And the Mahaprasad was gone. That's weird. He became very confused. What's going on? So the next day, again, Mudugal Rishi arranged for Mahaprasad. And again, Dineshwar Sharma sat down, closed his eyes, did his acharana, chanted Swastivachana, his prayers. And when he opened his eyes, again the Mahaprasad was gone. And this went on for 3 days, and he didn't eat for 3 days. And on the 4th day, he was really bugging him. What's going on? Who's taking the Mahaprasad? So this is a story This Pramod Kumar Rajguru told us. What's going on? Who's taking this prasadam? So he did his prayers and he kind of had his eyes half open like that. And as he was chanting the prayers, he saw a really, really old man come in. The guy was so old, his hands were shaking. And that old man bent down and he picked up the plate of Mahaprasad and started going away. Dineshwar Sharma was thinking, this is so weird. What is going on? And he said, hey, old man, who are you? Why are you taking my prasad? When the old man, I know he didn't have a hearing aid, he couldn't hear very well, saw that Dineshwar Sharma had caught him, he became frightened and he started running as best the old man could. With a plate of Mahaprasad. As he was running, suddenly he stumbled. He fell down on the ground. The Mahaprasad went everywhere. And that old man bashed his head on the ground and he died. And Dineshwar Sharma is just like, this is so weird. What is going on? And he felt so terrible. He said, this old man, he's a Brahmin. The old man was a Brahmin. He came to get Jagannath Mahaprasad. And because of me, he's left his body. This is terrible. I have to do some kind of prayaschitta, some kind of atonement. What can I do? And Dineshwar Sharma knew Shastra. If you're responsible for killing a Brahmin, the only atonement you can do is to take your own life. And you should throw yourself in the fire, the funeral pyre of the person who you were responsible for killing. And so he made a fire. He put the body of that old man on the fire, and then he was getting ready to jump into the fire when an amazing thing happened. This is a really far story. Suddenly, the form of the Lord, who's known as Yajna-bhuk, the Supreme Personality of God, is worshipped by fire sacrifice and yajnas, came out of the fire. Lord Jagannath came out of the fire and told Dineshwar Sharma, what are you doing? You're my dear devotee. Don't commit suicide. And Dineshwar Sharma said, well, this whole thing's been going on. I had this big disagreement with Raja Chodaganga-dev, and he wanted to dress you in an opulent way, but I said, no, it should be a simple way. And Lord Jagannath said, I know. It's okay. And he said, actually, I like your dress. And he picked up Dineshwar Sharma, and he put him on his left leg, and he patted him on the back. Meanwhile, while all these really far-out things were going on, Maharaj Chodaganga-dev had been watching everything from behind a column. And when he saw Lord Jagannath showing such mercy to Dineshwar Sharma, and he heard the comment from Lord Jagannath telling Dineshwar Sharma that he liked the dress that Dineshwar Sharma gave, Maharaj Chodaganga-dev felt terrible. And he began to cry. And he came out from behind the column and he fell down on the ground and he began offering prayers. My dear Lord, please forgive me. I'm a great offender. I offended your devotee, Dineshwar Sharma. I didn't know that you liked this simple dress at Vrindavan. Please forgive me. I should jump in the fire. And then Lord Jagannath told him, chill out. He said, I also like your dress. And Lord Jagannath picked up Maharaj Chodaganga-dev and put him on his right lap and patted him on the back also. So this story was told to us by the Samanta Pandit Sri Pramod Kumar Rajguru, the Kula Guru, for the current Kula Guru for the Gajapati dynasty, the kings of Puri. And he explained to us then after, he said, this is the origin of the Sunnavesh. It comes from the dress of Maharaj Chodaganga-dev, this very opulent Sunnavesh, this golden dress. And he explained to us how 3 or 4 times a year, Lord Jagannath dresses in very opulent dresses like this. Another dress is called Raja Rajvesh, or the King of Kings. He has there's several dresses where he dresses in a very, very opulent way, maybe 2 or 3, 4 times a year. But the Rajguru told us that every day, Lord Jagannath accepts the dress of Dineshwar Sharma. Now, when I was growing up in school,